Now you're talking about this woman, a county judge. And when Pam Bondi comes out there and says, we will come after you and we will prosecute you, we will find you, that is meant to have a chilling effect. They didn't need to.
What's your solution? Again,
but
you
they
cite polls, but I apologize. Adults have to do the adult job. It's not going to be popular.
You know what the adult job is? First of all, not announcing this on social media, having to take it down and then putting it back up. The adult thing to do would be to have called her in and have her come in and have a conversation about it. They didn't need
live television, for all its curated gloss and carefully planned segments, occasionally erupts into something far more chaotic, more primal. This is precisely what unfolded when Greg Gutfeld stepped into the ring, transforming what should have been a standard news discussion into an unforgettable verbal WWE smackdown. It was a brutal, brilliant takedown of Jessica Tarlov, a performance so completely dominant it left jaws on the floor and questions swirling in the air. Was it genius? Was it savage? Or was it simply Gutfeld being Gutfeld, utterly unleashed? Buckle up, because this intellectual cage match exploded, hitting harder and faster than anyone could have predicted. It wasn't just a moment, it was a masterclass in rhetorical combat that cemented Gutfeld's reputation as the reigning king of late-night political snark.
That's total indoctrination. All the intersectionality,
By the way,
trans.
That's the statement. You don't think that black trans people exist, or black queer people exist, or
non-conforming people? That's a straw man
people?
or a straw trans. Excuse me.
Don't do that. This is serious.
No, I'm actually being serious. Just because people do not want that stuff, because it's age inappropriate, does not make them transphobic, because you're going there.
Okay, well, let's talk about a book ban now. Out of Darkness, a young adult novel about two teens that have a relationship.
Yeah,
it's now been 16 school districts.
It started as a typical day on The Five.
The day began as any other on The Five. The usual round table of sharp opinions, fueled by coffee and simmering rants, promised the standard clash of perspectives. Each panelist, armed with their carefully crafted talking points, geared up for another predictable exchange, often with at least one person desperately trying to project an aura of superior intellect. Enter Jessica Tarlov, wielding charts, data, and a palpable air of faux intellectual smugness that could make a seasoned TED Talk speaker blush. She exuded the confidence of someone convinced that sheer statistical force could win any argument. And then there was Greg. He was locked, loaded, and practically foaming at the mouth with an anticipation that radiated across the set, his characteristic smirk hinting at the chaos he was ready to unleash. The topic at hand, Biden's economic shifts, or as some preferred to call it, Build Back Broker, initially seemed straightforward enough to handle, but with these two, nothing ever truly remained calm. The air itself seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension, a silent promise of an impending storm.
Of dollars from Medicaid and Medicare to give tax breaks to the wealthy.
Not true, but okay.
It is 100% true.
You are spinning.
I'm not.
You are spinning so fast. I'm getting under my eyes.
Looking straight ahead.
They're not.
Ask Josh Hawley. And
okay, hold on. Let me get him on the phone. Josh?
Tell him I loved his op-ed.
Right.
And Greg mentioned a staggering level of corruption. And I just got a note that the staggering level of corruption from last night's meme coin dinner.
That's what you're focusing on, the meme coin.
No, 40% of Donald Trump's wealth has been accumulated since he became president.
Jessica pounced first, launching into a monologue that sounded less like a spontaneous thought and more like it had been meticulously prepared, perhaps even sponsored by the DNC, or brought to you by the same folks who curated Critical Race Theory 101 and painstakingly crafted gluten-free feelings. She came in hot with a rapid-fire barrage of statistics, citing unemployment rates, GDP growth, and something about green job initiatives with the kind of fevered intensity that made you wonder if she genuinely believed she was in a TED Talk or perhaps running for valedictorian of the MSNBC fan club. She rattled off facts like she was trying to win a spelling bee in a tornado, her voice rising with each data point, utterly oblivious to the fact that Greg had already sharpened his comedic knives and was practically salivating. He wasn't just observing, he was dissecting, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce, his silence a strategic weapon.
Original doctor who forged that letter about him, like, come on here.
Come on, is actually comparing him to this. This is a mess. Like, you have no reason to question the Dems about this. Are you out of your mind? They have the best doctors in the world and a patient who is arguably the most important patient in the world who gets tested pretty much weekly. They have to check him out, but somehow they decided not to do this. I'm wondering, do you believe that story, or is it possible the Democrats might be lying? Ooh, that's a tough call. Listen to Joe Scarborough.
Meanwhile, Greg sat there with the unsettling patience of a predator in tall grass, his gaze fixed, unwavering, absorbing every word. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even blink. He just stared with that signature smirk, the one that screamed, "Say something stupid, I dare you. Give me an opening." His internal monologue was practically audible across the room, a silent dare hanging in the air, building an almost unbearable suspense that permeated the studio. Every pause Tarlov took, every breath she drew, was met with Gutfeld's unblinking, expectant stare, waiting for that perfect, fatal moment. The stage was set, the spotlight was theirs, and the trap was meticulously laid. She was about to step right into it, unaware of the impending rhetorical detonation.
Where Donald Trump, after asking him to overturn the election, to not do his job at certifying it, he says to Mike Pence, you're too honest. When someone says you're too honest, that means that you want them to do the dirty thing, that you want them to do the bad thing. Then on page 15
you can disagree with that. You can disagree with that, but you don't arrest somebody over it.
But you can't disagree with the fact that he knew that he had lost the election because everyone in Christendom...
You're going to try to say that Donald Trump knew he lost.
There's no way.
They're going to try to prove that in court, Jessica. There's no way he's going to be proven that he knew he lost. He still thinks he's president.
Well, then the insanity defense is available.
And oh, did Jessica deliver? Her fatal mistake, accusing conservatives of using wokeism as a mere distraction. It was a classic, almost predictable move, akin to telling Gordon Ramsay his steak tasted better frozen, or suggesting a mime needs more stage presence. You could almost physically see Greg's pupils dilate. His internal sarcasm sensors began buzzing like a Geiger counter at a Chernobyl reunion. That silent dare transformed into an audible thought. "Oh, sweetheart, bless your heart. It's go time. You've just handed me the match." The atmosphere on set shifted instantly. The air thickened, charged with an electric energy. The fuse was lit, and the explosion was no longer avoidable. The audience leaned forward, sensing the shift from polite debate to outright verbal war.
Half is, here's a nice thing for you. The second half is missing. Who pays for it? You saw this with student loan theft, described as forgiveness. Who paid for it? You paid for it. You see with immigration policy, who's footing the billions and all that free stuff? You're paying for it. Nothing is free. Nothing is free. And the sooner or later you figure that out, the better off you're going to be. And that's directed at Democrats who don't understand that these policies are going to sink this country.
Gutfeld launched into a tirade so sharp, it could have shaved Elon Musk's ego clean off. It was equal parts stand-up comedy and political demolition derby. He didn't just disagree with Jessica, he utterly obliterated her perspective, framing her entire worldview as a volatile cocktail of liberal delusion, government overreach, and Whole Foods morality. Organic, overpriced, and utterly detached from reality. He mocked her for treating politics like a college seminar taught by professors who still use typewriters and genuinely believed that a tweet was a form of meaningful activism. Progressive compassion, he quipped, his voice dripping with contempt, is just tyranny with a hug. He painted a vivid picture of being smothered in regulations and then made to thank them for it, drawing the absurd analogy of being mugged by a therapist. The studio erupted in genuine, visceral laughter. Jessica, stunned and visibly deflating, could only blink, her previous smugness replaced by a look of dawning horror. Greg didn't just win the exchange, he utterly redecorated the battlefield, transforming it into his own personal arena, marked by the smoking craters of Tarlov's shattered arguments.
Of this cryptocurrency who came over here to have dinner with him, a guy from South Korea.
This is not even part of the segment.
So what?
You're talking about a meme coin.
Yeah,
no, I'm talking about who's corrupt and who is profiting off the American office.
Did he try to cover that up? I don't think so.
Yeah, Caroline Levitt said
you're defending an administration that covered up a dying leader, and you're sitting here going, but meme coin, meme coin.
I'm saying billions.
All right, let's give Paul a chance to clean it up real quick. Paul,
He accused Jessica of worshiping data the way Instagram influencers worship ring lights, overexposed, artificial, and entirely dependent on carefully chosen angles. His metaphors didn't just land, they detonated one after another, exploding with precision. They came swinging like Muhammad Ali wielding a thesaurus, each one a direct hit. He laid bare the fundamental fallacy of free policies with devastating clarity. Who pays for it? You paid for it. He cited student loan theft disguised as forgiveness and the billions-footing immigration policy, all pointedly directed at the audience as their burden, their disappearing dollars. He then took her logic, twisted it, and compared it to raccoons managing a 401k, chaotic, aimless, and somehow always sticky with an inexplicable mess. The studio audience didn't just laugh, they howled, a collective roar of recognition and amusement. One unfortunate soul in the back, who'd bravely attempted to eat a gluten-free muffin during the segment, nearly choked on it. Jessica could only blink, her composure visibly fraying, her face a canvas of disbelief. Greg, meanwhile, merely smirked, the architect of chaos. The table wasn't just turned, it had been flipped, set on fire, and then turned into a viral TikTok trend, leaving Jessica's argument smoldering in its wake.
About Joe's decline. They're trying to present themselves as a loyal staff protecting an incapacitated leader, and yet the policies were anything but feeble. He may have been a mess, but the policies were a coherent list of woke desires. And true, the decisions may have possibly destroyed the country, but that wasn't a byproduct of Biden's brain. That was deliberate and determined, and we need to find out who that person was. This is what Trump is talking about when he's mentioned the auto pen. This isn't just about a cover-up of Joe's incapacity, it's why.
Jessica, bless her delusional heart, tried desperately to clap back. She mustered the kind of fake composure you'd expect from someone who'd lost the argument 5 minutes ago, but was still stubbornly convinced a spreadsheet could rescue their dignity. She rolled out statistics with the smugness of a TED Talk speaker who just discovered graphs for the very first time. She brought up red state crime rates and urban decay, as if that was some irrefutable silver bullet. As if Donald Trump personally moonlighted as Gotham's Joker and Greg was his getaway driver. But here's the thing, facts, when drenched in smug, don't hit. They slide off. They evaporate in the face of raw charisma, especially when delivered with a casual disregard for polite debate. And Greg, he wasn't just standing there. He was building a one-man roast special with a casualness that bordered on elegant cruelty, his eyes twinkling with the knowledge that he was about to land another knockout blow. She was trying to out-Greg Greg, and it came off like using a butter knife in a sword fight. Pathetically inadequate.
As dignity.
Even if that was a bad representation by Trump, it has to be to their detriment. Who lost? No one.
But basically, everyone who is defending Donald Trump in this, from Kevin O'Leary to some folks here, is saying it is okay to falsify your business records, to issue false financial statements, to commit conspiracy for insurance fraud.
Well,
when he goes out there,
where's the fraud?
The fraud is, and David Brooks lays this out really nicely.
But
Donald Trump continually.
There were 3 sets of books. Where do you get that from? Where do you get that from?
I think
Greg escalated. He didn't just rebut. He remixed, deconstructed, and rebuilt her facts into punchlines with the surgical precision of a master chef slicing sushi. Jessica dropped Heritage Foundation stats like she was pulling out Excalibur, believing them to be her salvation. Problem was, Greg came with a chainsaw. He flipped her own conservative sources against her, deadpanning with a wicked grin that even her conservative sources are bored of her voice. The room cracked open with collective laughter, a sound that resonated with the raw, brutal truth of his statement. It was mean. It was sharp. It was perfect. Jessica looked like someone who had just realized their parachute was a napkin mid-skydive. Greg, already loading the next metaphor into the canon, didn't miss a beat. He then compared Jessica's tone to a TED Talk at a Portland kombucha bar. One of those painfully earnest ones where someone in hemp sandals tells you how quinoa healed their childhood trauma. Policy kale, he called it. Intellectual tofu. It was crunchy, flavorless, and somehow still utterly smug. The audience erupted, a tidal wave of mirth that even the camera guy couldn't resist, snorting with amusement. Jessica sat there, lips pursed so tightly she looked like she just sucked a lemon steeped in disappointment, visibly marinating in a sea of her own performative righteousness. Desperately clutching at relevance, she launched one final Hail Mary, lecturing Greg on how citing data isn't elitist, but it came out less like a mic drop moment and more like a Wikipedia footnote delivered with an inexplicable attitude. She was drowning in her own smug syllables, utterly confusing moral superiority with a genuine, relatable personality trait. Meanwhile, Gutfeld, looking like a fox let loose in a vegan petting zoo, leaned back with the unassailable confidence of someone who already knew how this story ended. With a smirk that could curdle oat milk on contact, Greg declared debating Jessica was like arguing with an NPR podcast. Monotone, painfully earnest, and completely humorless. "She's like if C-SPAN and a yoga retreat had a baby," he quipped, not even trying to hide the thinly veiled contempt. Jessica blinked, stunned, as if someone had just insulted her favorite barista's pronouns. Her grand rebuttal? A desperate, pathetic jab at Greg's pants. Yes, his pants. After a segment drenched in rhetoric, stats, and snark, she chose slacks. Cute, but utterly weak, like throwing a cotton ball at a flamethrower. Greg brushed it off like lint. Because it was lint. He didn't even dignify it with a response. Why would he? He'd already drop-kicked her entire argument into the next news cycle, a pulverized heap of footnotes and data. By this point, he had so thoroughly owned the segment, you'd think he was collecting rent from her existence. Jessica, visibly rattled but trying to channel a post-woke Joan of Arc, clung to a self-righteous smirk which only highlighted how spectacularly she had face-planted. It wasn't confidence, it was delusion dressed as dignity, a desperate attempt to salvage what little pride remained. Greg, on the other hand, looked like he had just scored a political touchdown, moonwalked into the end zone, and spiked the ball on her moral pedestal, leaving it cracked and broken. Twitter, as always, did what Twitter does. It detonated. Liberals, bless their hearts, tried valiantly to spin it, calling Jessica the queen of calm, as if blank stares and passive-aggressive condescension were signs of valor. Conservatives, however, wasted no time crowning Greg the undisputed MVP of televised trolling, a performance artist of political mockery. Jessica wanted to inspire. She ended up as a viral meme. Here's the unvarnished truth of that night. Greg Gutfeld didn't just win the segment. He obliterated it. Jessica came armed with facts. Greg came with fire. And guess what plays better on television? Not a spreadsheet, but a scorched earth monologue delivered by a man who's turned snark into an Olympic sport and wins the gold with both middle fingers up. Jessica Tarlov, bless her over-prepared heart, marched into that segment armed with bullet points, polling data, and the smug expression of someone who just discovered conditional formatting in Excel and believed it was a superpower. She thought she was going to deliver a masterclass in calm, rational debate, a beacon of intellect against conservative chaos. Instead, she got rolled like a toddler's Play-Doh set, flattened into an unrecognizable mess. Gutfeld didn't just counter her arguments, he made them look like poorly translated IKEA instructions, confusing, redundant, and somehow completely useless. While Jessica was busy reading off stats like a GPS that's lost signal in a tunnel, rattling off, according to Pew Research, page 4, Greg was already halfway through dismantling her entire persona with one-liners that should be illegal in 7 states. The woman brought a PowerPoint to a flamethrower fight, and by the end, you could practically see the scent of burnt dignity rising from her side of the screen, a visible smoke signal of her utter defeat. The next day, the media ecosystem did what it does best. Pretend Jessica had won in spirit, fabricating a narrative of her being some sort of martyr of modern punditry. MSNBC wrote breathless think pieces about the power of composure, as if staying upright while getting rhetorically flattened is some kind of profound moral victory. Slate, always ready to hand out participation trophies, declared Jessica a modern-day stoic. Cute. What's next? A Nobel Prize for emotional endurance for managing to sit still? Meanwhile, Gutfeld's fanbase detonated like they just witnessed the second coming of George Carlin. His zingers, particularly the now iconic intellectual tofu jab, were instantly canonized in right-wing pop culture. TikTok flooded, Instagram exploding, YouTube Shorts dominated. Somewhere, a teenager probably got detention for quoting Gutfeld in class during a history debate. And yes, intellectual tofu is probably being embroidered on throw pillows as we speak, a testament to its cultural impact. This wasn't just gold. It was 24 karat, hand-delivered, and dipped in the tears of fact-checkers who suddenly realized their role was obsolete. This was peak Gutfeld. No fluff, no filter, just pure, unadulterated verbal napalm delivered in prime time. Jessica thought bullet points were a shield. Turns out they were just kindling. This wasn't just a debate, this was an ambush disguised as civil discourse. A verbal demolition derby where one participant showed up with a meticulously crafted policy paper and the other showed up with a flamethrower ready to torch the entire intellectual landscape. Jessica Tarlov, bless her heart, came armed with statistics, charts, and that painfully polite tone that screams, "I read The Economist cover to cover and still think I'm fun at parties, honestly." Meanwhile, Greg Gutfeld swaggered in like a stand-up comic with a deep-seated vendetta, weaponizing sarcasm like it was military-grade artillery. Jessica brought research, painstakingly gathered, probably in a candlelit room filled with binders and scented highlighters. Greg brought ratings, an innate understanding of televised entertainment, and enough snark to power the Fox News studio for the next 6 months. She spoke in meticulously structured paragraphs. He replied in blistering, concise punchlines. She aimed for nuance, for intellectual precision. He aimed for the jugular, for the gut laugh. She sounded like a blog post no one bothered to finish reading. He sounded like a roast master who moonlights as a highly effective political assassin. And the crowd wasn't there for a TED Talk. They were there for blood. They didn't come to watch a spreadsheet duel. They came to watch Jessica's talking points get tossed into a rhetorical wood chipper. And Greg, he revved the engine with every smug grin and every, "Are you seriously saying that?" eye roll, building the tension, creating the spectacle. It was reality TV for policy wonks, and a public shaming for anyone who still truly believes a debate can be won with mere logic alone. Jessica tried, truly. She clung to her citations like a life raft in a turbulent sea, while Greg dismantled her arguments with the casual flair of a man who's been dunking on Democrats since the era of dial-up internet. Every time she tried to steer the conversation back to data, Greg swerved it into a sarcastic monologue that made her look like a humorless librarian trapped in a cage match with a stand-up comic hopped up on Red Bull and pure Reaganomics. Greg Gutfeld proved something profoundly important that night. The best argument doesn't always wear a tie or come meticulously footnoted. Sometimes the best argument is a smirk, a perfectly timed sideways glance, and a perfectly aimed jab that leaves your opponent flailing desperately in a sea of qualifiers and academic citations, utterly lost and exposed. Jessica Tarlov learned painfully that condescension might feel smart and morally superior in one's own mind, but it doesn't land nearly as hard as sarcasm served medium rare with a sizzling side of "I told you so," delivered with a flourish. In the end, this wasn't a policy debate. It was ideological theater, performed in surround sound, a spectacle of rhetorical dominance. Greg didn't just win. He lit the stage on fire, dropped the mic, and left Jessica wandering through the smoke, clutching her binder like it was a shield that could somehow save her from the inescapable humiliation. He didn't just steal the show, he completely rewrote the script, burned the set down to ashes, and left Jessica standing alone in the smoldering ruins, still quoting polling data as if that would magically bring the audience back to her side. She thought she was in a debate. Greg knew he was in a show, and he made damn sure the audience, and everyone watching at home, would never forget who the undisputed headliner was.